Hey yo, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Samson, and in today's video we are finally starting with part 3 of the manual transmission swap for the 4.1 liter Stroker Max. We actually have to head down to Mebane, which is kind of close to Greensboro, to go pick up the wiring harness that the guys at NIS Foreman's are wiring up for me a little bit right now. I think there's 2 pins on the crankshaft sensor that you have to change, and you also have to sort of pin into the transmission part of the harness in order to make sure that your reverse light works and that the car will actually just go ahead and start up when it's at least in neutral. So we have to go pick up that harness, we have to go pick up the flywheel, and we're going to go ahead and get started with the build. If you guys like this type of content, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. But just like that, guys, let's go ahead and get to it. All right, guys, so I decided to go with the JWT flywheel, and yes, we are in the house right now because I do have to put these dowel pins in, and I don't want to necessarily hammer them in out there on the concrete, so I decided to come in where I got some carpet. The JWT flywheel is supposed to be half the weight of the stock flywheel for our particular car, for the Maximas and Ultimas. Now, of course, I'm doing a manual swap, so I don't know what the stock dual mass flywheel feels like, but this is supposed to not only net you some more horsepower, but also make it so that your car revs a little bit easier. And so we do have to put these dowel pins in the correct locations, and we have to hammer those in. I'm going to get these hammered in and be with you guys in a second. All right, guys, so we went on ahead, we got these hammered in, and this is the correct way for them to go. We're going to go ahead, go out there and try to put this on the motor, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, so as you can see, we have the upper oil pan off of the bottom of the motor. And for those of you who may have missed my video where I built the engine, this is what the inside of it looks like. You can see everything still looks really clean. The rods are not moving, so that means that we're good as far as clearance goes. We don't have any loose rods, which is a positive thing. You can see we do have those forged rods, as well as the forged pistons, which you can't see, but they're down there, and that billet girdle. As far as the upper oil pan, here is the new one. Not only did I have to get a new one because my old one was cracked, but also the new one has a bit of a different configuration. So whenever you're doing this manual swap, you're going to have a different location for your crankshaft position sensor. On this oil pan for the manuals, it's up here on the side, whereas for this oil pan for the automatics, it's down here on the bottom. So you have to get a different oil pan. All right, guys, so we have the upper oil pan installed. The lower oil pan is, I got that sitting up right now. Went on ahead and put some gasket maker around it. And I put the bolts in. You can see I haven't tightened them down because I'm waiting for that gasket maker to sort of tack up a little bit. But we do have the upper oil pan already fully installed. It is already tacked up. The bolts and everything are already torqued down. And like you guys know, we do have our seals. Everything should be good to go. Now we're going to go ahead, and after we tighten up this lower oil pan, it'll be time to put the oil cooler back into the upper oil pan. It's held on by this little bolt right here. It'll be time to put that back on the upper oil pan. And one thing real quick, guys, if you're doing a swap like this, there's always going to be little components that you need that you didn't know that you needed. Since the upper oil pan right here is for a manual transmission instead of a automatic transmission, if you're doing this swap, you're going to need another bolt. You're going to already have this bolt, but for this swap, you're going to need another bolt on the upper oil pan, which is this one for the automatics. This section right here is cut out for the starter because the starter mounts to the transmission. So this section is cut out. So all you have is this bolt hole right here, which is a lot shorter. That bolt hole right here will probably be right here. So you have a lot shorter bolt. So what you're gonna need, if you're doing this swap, make sure that you guys get an additional bolt to put into this portion of the upper oil pan. But just like that, let's go ahead and let this stuff sit up a little bit more, get that tightened down, and then we can work on getting the rest of the stuff assembled and putting the flywheel on, then transmission. And one thing real quick, I know this is gonna be hard to see. As you guys can see, I do already have my pallet bearing in the crankshaft. I didn't film myself actually hammering it in. I forgot to, but you are gonna need a pallet bearing with this manual swap. And you can see I went with a Nismo pallet bearing. All that means is that it has these little needle bearings in there, which allow it to sort of like swivel a little bit easier than just the standard metal sleeve. So you are gonna have to hammer that in. One thing that I did to make it sort of go in a little bit easier is I actually stuck it in the freezer for a few hours. Actually, I stuck it in the freezer, let that metal get real cold and let it shrink. If you want to do it an even easier way, put it in the freezer and then come with a torch or something and actually heat up this portion of the crankshaft. And then you're still gonna have to hammer it in because it is a real tight fit. Nevertheless, it'll be a lot easier to hammer in when that metal is cold and shrinks up. All right, guys, so as you can see, we now have the upper oil pan on. We now have the lower oil pan on as well. Everything is tightened up with gasket maker. We also have the oil cooler on as well, and it is also bolted down and tightened down. Now, all that should be left is for us to go ahead, flip the motor over, and try to get the flywheel on. All right, guys, so we went on ahead, we took the motor off the stand. We're about to go ahead and install this flywheel. Now, it's very important. The crankshaft has a pin on it right there. You want to make sure that that pin lines up on the flywheel as well. We do have washers and bolts. We're going to go ahead and try to get this flywheel installed. All right, guys, so we got the flywheel on. As you guys can see, everything is installed. Now, you do want to go ahead and put red Loctite on your bolts. It's going to come with instructions. JWT does a good job of giving you instructions with that type of stuff. So we're going to go ahead and try to torque these down. And then we're going to go ahead and put the clutch on and update you guys whenever the clutch is up there as well. So we now have the pressure plate up here as well as having the clutch on the inside of the pressure plate. Those dowel pins that we had to hammer in earlier line up, and this pressure plate will only fit on the flywheel one way. There's only one way that this will go on, and all the dowel pins line up if you put them in correctly as specified on that piece of paper. And so we got to go ahead and torque these bolts down to 30 to 33 foot-pounds. As far as your clutch, you should make sure that your pallet bearing is in there, and also make sure that your alignment tool goes in and out of that hole smoothly before you go ahead and tighten down these bolts. So if that's going in and out of there smoothly, then you should be good to go. So we now have the manual transmission in here. As you can see, we do have the pressure plate on, as well as the flywheel and clutch. Like I mentioned, you do want to make sure that your alignment tool slides in and out of that hole easily. We should be good. Everything is torqued down. And I can tell you guys, strictly from a weight aspect, this is going to be an upgrade. This transmission right here, I can barely lift up off of the ground for a few steps. This one right here, I just carried it all the way in from the trunk out there. So this one is at least 100 to 200 pounds lighter, maybe 150 pounds lighter than this transmission. So we're already saving weight, as well as we're going to have a lot less drivetrain loss because there's less moving components in this one. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this one installed. All right, guys, sorry I couldn't get any of the installation of the transmission on camera. Not only did my phone die, but it took me and my dad, I would say probably about 15 to 20 minutes just to get it in. Just trying to line up the splines. It is a lot more difficult than I originally thought it was going to be to just line up the splines. And plus the transmission does have some weight to it. So when you're trying to hold it up and also line up the splines and move it, it's just a little bit of a cumbersome deal. But as you can see, we do have the shift boot up here. We also have the shifter. I can't even move it because it is up against the pressure plate. I do have to get a few bolts if you're doing this swap. As far as your mounting bolts for the transmission, it's going to be different since your starter is mounted up here. You're going to need 2 bolts that are longer in order to mount to the transmission. So I do have to go get some longer bolts. And one thing that I did notice is it's going to be hard to see on camera, but the transmission, the manual transmission is a lot longer than the automatic transmission. You guys can see just how short that is, whereas with this one, you guys can see it's a lot longer. So I'm assuming when I put this in the car, I'm gonna have to sort of come in at a diagonal approach. But nevertheless, this is what it looks like. All mounted up, everything is in place except for the starter. And so we're gonna probably go ahead and get the starter in, and then probably the next video will be us going ahead and trying to put it in the car. But just like that, guys, I hope that you enjoyed. A lot more coming very soon, especially with this car, but also meets, a lot more builds. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, like, comment, and subscribe. But just like that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.